I was saying, y'all, but Rico from RicoScores is coming out a little bit later than I expected. Sorry, got distracted. But now we're finally going to talk about my favorite defensive coordinator candidate for the Washington Commanders, who I feel like could be the best defensive coordinator candidate for the Washington Commanders, especially if we go offensive-minded head coach like a Ben Johnson or a Bobby Slowick, who would be the best defensive coordinator that we can bring in that can literally just totally handle the defensive side. Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, or anybody like that wouldn't even have to think about the defense or worry about it. That guy has it. So we're going to talk about my boy, and we're going to talk about why he's our best candidate. We're going to bring up stats. We're going to take a look at how he arguably made the biggest defensive statistical jump in 2023 out of any defensive coordinator, taking a bad defense to a really good one. So we're going to dive into that and why that's so important for us, with us in a rebuild mode, being able to maximize the talent of what you have currently at your disposal without necessarily needing elite players. That's what this guy specializes in. So let's dive into that. But before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned, because again, I'm loading up another mock draft because I know a lot of people want to see what it would be like to trade back a little bit from that number 2 overall pick, potentially taking like an elite tackle, maybe get quarterback later in the draft to compete with like a Sam Howell. But let's build around the quarterback and then see what we can do at quarterback secondary. So stay tuned for all of that. I'm still working on more live streams and call-in shows for y'all to call in so we can voice our opinions about what we want to do with the team free agency draft. We've already done like a head coach candidate one, especially as soon as we hire our head coach, hopefully Ben Johnson as soon as possible, or Bobby Slowick, Mike McDonald as soon as possible. We'll do a live stream on how we feel about that, and then what offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators we feel like are the best matches to work under them. So stay tuned for all of the content, man. Without further ado, man, let's go ahead and get to it. Let's get it. All right, so we're here to talk about defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen, defensive coordinator from the Falcons. He was originally blocked from interviewing for the Jacksonville's coordinator job and is now able to speak with teams as of like the January 17th. Multiple clubs do want to speak with him, and the Jaguars are one of the first ones hopping on the situation. So who knows, he may not even be available by the time that we go and get a Ben Johnson or Bobby Slowick or anybody like that. It may be a little too late by then because apparently a lot of teams want him. But again, at a certain point, the Falcons were definitely thinking about blocking him, but the fact that they're no longer blocking him shows that they're more than likely leaning towards a Bill Belichick type of person, which is, I think I've seen reported earlier today that he's going in for his second interview, which means he's more than likely going to end up being their head coach, and with a Bill Belichick type of person that wants to run the entire show. First of all, he's defensive minded, and I'm pretty sure my guy Ryan Nielsen wants to still have defensive play calling duties, to have full autonomy over the entire defense and all the decision making when it comes to that. Bill Belichick comes in and he's going to have a strong influence over the defense, probably even call the plays for the defense and things like that. So that's probably why he's ready to go. And again, originally the Falcons were doing whatever they could to block teams from even being able to interview the guy, but now that they're closing in on Bill Belichick, they already know that my boy Ryan would not even want to stick around with that, so they're giving him permission to look elsewhere for a job. And again, I'm hearing defensive coordinator, I'm not hearing potential head coaching candidate or anything like that. So that makes me very optimistic that if we can go ahead and get Ben Johnson hired or a Bobby Slowick hired soon, maybe we can go ahead and hit him up, and then maybe even if he was already leaning towards another team, say like the Jaguars, if we come in Adam Peters, Ben Johnson, and like, hey man, you can have full control of the defense, you do your thing, maybe we can sway them away. And even if it does not end up being Bill Belichick for the Falcons, which I hope it does, again, super Falcons hater, MVP, all-star starting point guard on the Falcons hater all-star team, level of hate for them Falcons. I hope they end up with Bill Belichick, because I think he's going to keep them perpetually average. Again, I just feel like he hasn't done anything before Tom Brady got there, and he hasn't done anything since Tom Brady left. Tom Brady was able to win the Super Bowl without him. He hasn't even gotten close without Tom Brady. So I'm predicting that he's going to probably keep the Falcons perpetually average. And again, that's the worst thing you could be at the NFL level, like I've already explained. So I'm hoping they get him. But also on top of the reason why I hope they get him is because a guy like my boy, Ryan Nielsen, would probably want to leave. And also just looking at what the Falcons have going on as far as their head coaching search potentially, they've requested to interview a couple of offensive coordinator type of guys, but for the most part, it's been defensive minded head coaches. So even if it's not Bill Belichick, it'll probably be a defensive minded head coach that still wants to run the defensive side of things. So it's still quite likely that my boy Ryan Nielsen's probably going to end up leaving and being a candidate out there for the Commanders to potentially try to get. I haven't seen any connection between the Commanders and Ryan Nielsen yet. I haven't seen not one connection, no report, no rumor, no anything. But this is just me, as in Rico of RicoScores, talking about who I want as our defensive coordinator, especially if we go the offensive-minded head coach route like a Ben Johnson or a Mike McDonald. Now moving on, one thing that does worry me is that one thing I am seeing rumors about is that a lot of top executives and reporters and analysts are saying that, hey man, that boy Ryan Nielsen's a little sneaky, like he's very underrated. Somebody may end up getting a steal in a defensive coordinator. A lot of people didn't necessarily pay attention to the Falcons last year, and they had some talent, but he definitely elevated that talent. We're going to get to that when we get to all of the stats and things like that. The difference in the stats between the 2022 Atlanta Falcons and the 2023 Atlanta Falcons. And man, even having to say Atlanta Falcons that much in a video is even killing me inside, man. And even wanting anybody from that organization, even a defensive coordinator, is killing me inside as well. But that lets you know how serious this guy is. He's my favorite defensive coordinator candidate out there, and he's a Falcon. But back to my original point, there are a lot of whispers behind the scenes saying that you could argue that a lot of people feel like he's the best defensive coordinator candidate out there. I like Don Wink Martindale from the Giants as well. And what more hilarious scenario would that be for us to go against the Giants twice a year after he recently just cussed out Brian Daboll before they split apart? I mean, that level of revenge would be amazing. But also, Wink Martindale is just a great defensive coordinator. That's a guy that you can trust to just completely run the defensive side of things, and he'll handle it. He also elevates talent, but I feel like my boy Ryan Nielsen does it better than any other potential candidate out there. I'm not saying he's the best defensive coordinator in the NFL, but out of all of the defensive coordinator candidates out there, to me, he's the best one. Don Wink Martindale's probably my 1B, but Ryan Nielsen is definitely my 1A. And he's not very old. He's only 44 years old, which is very young at that level of rank in the coaching staff. Defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, and especially head coach. 44 is actually pretty young. Now, granted, if he's as great as I hope, then maybe another team will want to take him from it. So I don't necessarily see him being like this long-term defensive coordinator for the Commanders for the next 5-10 years type of thing. But I feel like we would be lucky to be able to have that opportunity if he wanted to. But I think he's too good. Again, the way that he elevates talent and maximizes the talent that he has at his disposal, I can see him potentially getting a head coaching job not far from now. But again, he's only 44 years old. So we will have Ben Johnson potentially at 37 years old, or Bobby Slowick at 36 years old, and then your defensive coordinator could potentially be 44 and Ryan Nielsen. That's a very young staff right there. And Adam Peters is very young for a GM. He's only 44 years old, and a lot of GMs be up there in like the 50s, the 60s, maybe even a little bit older. So we could have like this super young prodigy, innovative, trailblazing front office and coaching staff type of situation. He would be like the final puzzle piece to that, and I would love that, man. For us to have potentially one of the youngest groups of elite minds in the NFL and also being a Super Bowl contender at the same time, that just sounds like the brightest future possible. We will be far more worried about another team taking one of those guys from us than having to worry about them retiring or getting tired of doing it or anything like that. A lot of these guys are just now getting into their primes of their careers. We will be getting them at the perfect time, man. And now let's dive into the stats, because I know a lot of y'all are wondering, man, why does Rico like this random guy so much? You probably never even heard of his name throughout this season unless you watched the Falcons game. You probably have no idea who Ryan Nielsen is. Well, first of all, again, let's talk about the impact that he had on the Falcons, the transition going from 2022 to this is his first season that he just was with the Falcons for 2023. First year getting there, and listen to these jumps in production and rankings. In his first season as the Falcons defensive coordinator, and it's not even like he was already on the Falcons staff and worked his way up from like defensive lines coach to defensive analyst or anything to defensive coordinator. This guy came from the Saints as a co-defensive coordinator slash defensive lines coach, and then this was his first time being a full-blown defensive coordinator at the NFL level in his entire coaching career. Again, he's fairly young though, so that's not surprising, but in his first year of not only being a defensive coordinator for the Falcons, but being a defensive coordinator ever at the NFL level in his life, he took them from the 26th ranked defense in yards per play allowed to the 7th. He took them from the 31st in third down conversion percentage allowed to the 3rd. And he also took them from the 25th ranked pass defense to the 8th. And it's not even like they made some monumental changes going from 2022 to 2023. The biggest change they made was signing safety Jessie Bates. And yes, he was great. And he was great before he even got to the Falcons. So it's not even like you can necessarily give Ryan Nielsen credit for why Jessie Bates was balling out. That guy was different before he even got to the Falcons, and the Falcons added him. So that is a big difference going from 2022 to 2023. But Jessie Bates is not enough of a difference to go from 26th to 27th in yards per play allowed, 31st to 3rd in third down defense conversion percentage allowed, and then 25th to 8th in pass defense. Like, Jessie Bates great and all, but that's Ryan Nielsen, man. Also, the Falcons had 178 total pressures on roughly 661 passing snaps that the defense faced this past season. That was a 27% pressure rate. That's 5% better than the 22% they had last year. So it's not even just like overall defensive statistics. He also got more production out of the defensive line that the Falcons had. And yeah, their defense overall wasn't like the most elite in the NFL. It wasn't the 49ers or the Ravens. I would argue against that by saying they also don't have anywhere near the talent that the 49ers or the Ravens have. So it's not elite statistically necessarily, but it's still really good, and I want you to just mainly focus on the jump. But still, overall, the defense was still pretty good. I mean, to look at their overall rankings in a lot of different ways, they were 10th in opponents' yards per game. Again, 8th in yards per play, like we already talked about. They, like we already said, 3rd in third down conversion percentage allowed, 4th in opponent red zone scoring, touchdown percentage allowed. That's big time. And 9th in opponent touchdowns allowed per game as well. And run defense wise, they were 9th in opponent's yards per rush. They were 9th in opponent completion percentage as far as passing the ball goes. They were 9th in opponent's yards per pass, 8th in opponent's passing yards per game, but they were only 19th in sack percentage and 29th in opponent interception percentage. So they got to improve there. But that's really it. Everything else was at the very least good to very good to a couple of things being elite. And who are we as Commanders fans to turn down somebody like that when we were ranked dead last in most statistics that we just read out? And again, he's like 8th, 4th, 9th, 10th in most statistics that we discussed. So I'm telling you, man. And again, the jump within a year when we're a rebuilding team, that's the most attractive thing right now. That's why I'm starting to lean a little bit more towards Bobby Slowick as a head coach potentially, even though I think Ben Johnson is more likely. And even though I would still love Ben Johnson, he's still 1B, possibly the Bobby Slowick 1A. I don't know. And every day I wake up, it flips back and forth. Still my favorite two candidates. Mike McDonald is a very close 3rd. You could argue he's 1C, not even 3. Is that close? But the reason I'm starting to really lean towards Bobby Slowick is because he did more with less. Ben Johnson's great, but Bobby Slowick definitely did the best job of getting more out of less and being a first-time defensive coordinator. Ben Johnson has already been the offensive coordinator for the Lions. Again, he almost went to become a head coach for the Panthers and returned as the offensive coordinator for the Lions. This was Bobby Slowick's not only first time being the Texans offensive coordinator, this was his first time being an offensive coordinator at the NFL level ever. Like, this is literally the Ryan Nielsen parallel right here. They have the exact same situation. This was his first year as in Ryan Nielsen being a defensive coordinator ever in his life and improved the team on defense vastly. Same thing with Bobby Slowick. His first time being an offensive coordinator in his entire life, his NFL career, and look what he did with the Texans. And then also his ability to develop a quarterback and maximize the talent that he had with them, because they didn't have a really good offensive line at all. and he still made it work. Rookie quarterback, CJ Stroud is great. As a Georgia Bulldog fan, I know CJ Stroud is different, but still to get that level of production and consistency out of a rookie quarterback like that and to win a playoff game the way that they did, and then to maximize the talent of I like Nico Collins. I like their receiving group. I like that whole thing, but nobody thinks that there's just this top 5 receiver group like they were productivity wise. Like that was a lot of Bobby Slowick. So again, both of these guys between Bobby Slowick and Ryan Nielsen are just great at maximizing the talent and doing more with less. And to have that potentially on both sides of the ball is insane. But even if we end up with Ben Johnson, which I hope we do, please, I don't even like to word it as end up with Ben Johnson. If we're lucky to get Ben Johnson, either way, offensive coordinator minded head coach, I think you go ahead and get Ryan Nielsen, let him completely run the defense on his own. And most importantly, with us in this rebuild stage, we're going to be bringing in a lot of rookies. We may bring in some fairly bargain bin shopping type of free agent moves just to kind of build a basis and a foundation to work with under Adam Peters. We're going to need somebody that knows how to maximize talent, develop guys quickly. Not within 2, 3 years, 4 years by the time their rookie contract ends. We need a guy within these guys' rookie years of going out there and looking like future Pro Bowlers. And who better to do that than a Ryan Nielsen? Again, going from almost dead last to third in any statistic is phenomenal. I don't care what it is, especially third down conversion percentage allowed by your opponents. And the Commanders have struggled with third downs the majority of the time when Ron Rivera was here. I mean, just imagine Adam Peters and his ability to find elite talent in day 3 of the draft. Like, that's his thing. You can argue he's better at that than any other talent evaluator in the entire NFL. With all of the guys that he drafted for the 49ers, George Kittle, you could argue even Fred Warner in the 3rd round, but going 4th round and later, getting Talanoa Hufanga and Elijah Mitchell, again, George Kittle. I mean, just straight bangers. And then going and signing Charvarius Ward and getting more out of him than even the Chiefs did when he was relatively balling out for them as well. And there's just so many players. We could just go down the list. So many strong contributors, so many Pro Bowlers that he found outside of the first 3 rounds of the draft is just incredible. So a talent evaluator like that paired with a defensive-minded guy like that, a defensive genius like Ryan Nielsen, come on, man. But let me let y'all know this, though. This is not his first time working his magic, man. This guy has a history of making teams better wherever he's at. He gets a lot of the credit for how elite Cam Jordan has been throughout of his career. Like, a lot of people literally call him the Cam Jordan whisperer. And even Cam Jordan, once he got the job with the Falcons, thanked them in a funny way and was basically saying he was a traitor. But he was just joking with them. But he was basically saying, man, we're going to miss you. And like, you are really the reason that I developed into such a great pass rusher with great technique and run integrity, all of the nuanced things, all of the mental, technical sides of being a defensive lineman. Cam Jordan gives Ryan Nielsen all of the credit for that. And through 6 seasons as working as the Saints defensive lines coach, Nielsen worked alongside Jordan to help the defensive linemen to 5 Pro Bowls and to 2nd team All-Pro twice, and becoming the first defensive lineman in Saints history to ever earn a 1st team All-Pro honors. And again, Cam Jordan himself, you can see on his Twitter, anybody ask him, he gives Ryan Nielsen all of the credit for that. But also Trey Hendrickson, who eventually went on to the Bengals to ball out, but that's another guy that gives a lot of his credit as to why he's such a great player and why he's exceeded expectations that were placed on him coming out of the draft, and feels like he's reached his ceiling or maximized his own talent. A lot of people, including Trey Hendrickson himself, gives Ryan Nielsen the credit. Because when Trey Hendrickson first got to the NFL, he wasn't very good at first. And there was a reason he was taken 103rd overall in the 2017 draft. But then his 4th year, once Ryan Nielsen really started to work with that guy and finally got his hands on him, suddenly the 2020 season, he had 13.5 sacks and 22 solo tackles for his breakout year in his career, which also helped him leverage into a top 4-year, $60 million contract with the Bengals. And even with his so-so years, the first couple of years that he was in the NFL with the Saints. Including those years since 2017, Trey Hendrickson has recorded the highest pressure rate since entering the league in 2017. Minimum 300 pass rushes. He's with a 16.3% rate. Robert Quinn is second with 15.6. Nick Bosa's third. Marcus Davenport is fourth. And Myles Garrett is fifth. And Marcus Davenport, another Saints defensive lineman, a guy that was considered very raw with a high ceiling. And my boy Ryan Nielsen has him fourth since 2017 in pressure rate. And even though he was technically the co-defensive coordinator / defensive lines coach for the Saints the year before he went to become the defensive coordinator for the Falcons this past 2023 season, in 2022, when a lot of people give him credit for the number 3 ranked defense that the Saints have. So this guy has found a way to have success no matter where he's at. He helped, and a lot of people give him the most credit for leading the Saints to the number 3 defense in the NFL in 2022. Then he went to the Falcons and took them from one of the worst defenses in the NFL to one of the, at the very worst, top 10, arguably top 5 in certain statistics. And they had the biggest jump going from 2022 to 2023 out of any defense in the NFL. So no matter where he goes, your defense is going to be better than it was before he got there. And the Saints defense was still pretty good this past season, but they weren't the second best defense in the NFL or top 3 defense in the NFL like they were in 2022 when he was still there. Because they were 6th in opponents' points per game, still really good, but they were 13th in opponents' yards per game. They were 17th in opponents' yards per play. They were 22nd in opponents' rushing yards per play. So it's not like they fell off a cliff after he left, but they definitely weren't as good when he was there. So there's clear evidence to show that him leaving the Saints to become the Falcons defensive coordinator, the Saints got worse and the Falcons got better. I mean, the Saints didn't get much worse, slightly worse, but the Falcons got way better. He also runs a 4-3 defense, so that could be a smooth transition from Rivera and Jack Del Rio to potentially our next defensive coordinator being him, if such a thing even matters for real, because it is pretty difficult to flip a defensive roster upside down within one off season and then also switch from a 4-3 defense to a 3-4. And for that to even be a smooth transition. So if you want it to be a smooth transition, at the very least to help a little bit, maybe sticking with the same base defense with some players that you already currently have, maybe that can help. And then you move to a 3-4 over time, maybe in 2025 or something like that. But then again, I trust Adam Peters and our next defensive coordinator, whoever it is, especially if it's Ryan Nielsen, to be able to figure out what they want to do, even if they do want to end up switching to a 3-4 defense. Getting the right guys in the draft, free agency, developing them, all of that type of stuff. But there are definitely less growing pains with the option of transitioning to a new defensive coordinator with a new defensive scheme, but at least still running a base 4-3 defense, because personnel wise makes the transition a little bit easier. So I say all of that to say that another reason why Ryan is potentially a good option is because the transition will be fairly smooth, but I'm still not sure how much that actually matters and factors into things for real on the Adam Peters and potentially Ben Johnson as our head coach side of things. And again, like I already said earlier, I'm pretty sure this guy is highly sought after. There's reports going around, rumors, whispers in the background that he may arguably be the best defensive coordinator candidate out there. And there's a lot of teams out there that already have head coaches. And Ryan Nielsen, the Falcons didn't make it to the playoffs, so somebody can hire him tomorrow, and we wouldn't be able to do anything about it because we need to hire our head coach before we hire a defensive coordinator. So right now, you know, we're in an ugly predicament to where we just got to hope nobody takes him off the market for now. We'll see. But man, I'm telling you, Falcons fans were so happy to see Dan Quinn's defense look as bad as it did when it mattered most against the Green Bay Packers in that playoff game, man. They were having a great time watching the Cowboys lose to the Packers, just as much as we were, especially after allowing that 28-3 stupidity to take place. And so a lot of them laughing at Dan Quinn, but also boosting Ryan Nielsen and the impact that he had for the team. But I just thought this meme right here was hilarious about how Falcons fans were looking at Cowboys fans during that terrible blowout in the playoffs. And y'all already know, again, I hate Falcons fans with a passion, and I would love nothing more than to steal away one of the very few things going right for that organization. Oh, that would just be so sweet, especially since we got to play them, and then we walk in there and play them with their ex-defensive coordinator, and he shuts them down and holds them to 10 points or less. Come on, man. I would love that. I would love nothing more than that, man. That would be so beautiful. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get a notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Of course, get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. For sure, let me know how you feel about Ryan Nielsen. Were you already on Ryan Nielsen before I came out with this video and you agree, or did you not know about him or really think about him yet, and then this video helped convince you? Or even after hearing this video, do you still prefer somebody else? And if you do, let me know who and why, please, because you may be able to convince me. Maybe there's somebody I'm overlooking. Maybe there's some stats I missed. Maybe I'm not looking at something in the right light. But I know as of right now, based on everything I've seen, Ryan Nielsen is my guy. Don Wink Martindale from ex-Giants defensive coordinator is another great option for me as well, but this is my guy right here. So let me know how you feel about all of that. Again, infinite content on the way out, man. One-stop shop for everything Commander. Stay tuned. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.